Matt Zone had a comment about the lakefront plan to address your first question, Councilman.
Thank you, Dan. I represent a lakefront ward. I go from Edgewater Beach to the mouth of the Cuyahoga River. And soon after I became a councilman in 2002, that's when the city began the lakefront planning process. And I've been engaged in all of the meetings, the public meetings, as well as the steering committee meetings. I will tell you the objective of the lakefront plan is not to close Burke Lakefront Airport down. The objective of the lakefront plan is how can we connect residents from the south to the lakefront. And everything that the lakefront planning process is about is how can we create connectivity to the lakefront. The Burke question, I think you heard from the director about how difficult it will be, but there's a planning process as a part of that. Phase 1 of the lakefront plan goes from West Boulevard in Clifton all the way to the high-level bridge at West 28th Street. That's just phase 1. And there isn't any thought right now as a part of the lakefront plan, although you might see Burke looking green and maybe development opportunity, that is not part of the criteria of what we're looking at in terms of the lakefront plan.
Thank you very much, Councilman. We have a question over here, gentleman in gray, and then we'll get to your question. Go ahead.
Mayor Kirchner, City of Mentor. The question is I'm presuming, or I would ask, that is Burke still receiving FAA grants and monies from the government, and if so, is there a long-term commitment involved with that as far as keeping the airport open? And if there was a decision to close the airport, would there be a financial buyout that the city would have to incur to get out of the airport business?
Khalid Bahar. Oh, the question I should restate just is about federal grants for Burke and the impact that those have on any decision and what a negative impact might occur should Burke close.
Well, anytime you're dealing with grants, receiving grants, whether it's from a private foundation or from the FAA or the federal government, there are going to be limitations of the use of the grant, and there are going to be conditions associated with the acceptance of the grant. And the airport does receive FAA grants, and we are required as part of the grant to assure that the airport will remain open for a period of time. That's not to say that, if the airport was to close, you can buy the grant, the grant responsibilities out. But it's a bigger issue. Basically, I look at things simply. I don't overcomplicate things because it gives me a headache. It's a basic math equation, regardless of what you do, whether you're building a garage in your backyard or you're talking about closing the airport down. And the math equation takes into account the impact to county airport, the impact to Hopkins Airport delays that you have at the other two airports. And with the closure of Burke Airport, aside from the grant, you're going to have to make a business decision. Is the city and the county prepared to close down an airport and increase capacity at Hopkins or increase capacity at county airport? And doing so, there's a price tag associated with it, and the price tag is not cheap. I've heard numbers. I've been here for 5 years. I've heard numbers anywhere from $1 to $2 billion of new development that would be required if you were to close Burke Airport.
And to clarify right now, Burke is making money and is paying for itself?
Currently we receive funds from Hopkins Airport, subsidized from Hopkins Airport, but it's by design because the legacy airlines realize the importance of taking GA traffic, general aviation traffic, from Hopkins and bringing them down here to Burke. Currently at Hopkins Airport, there are approximately 20,000 general aviation operations per year that are there now, and our goal is to be able to remove those operations and bring them to Burke Airport, not by forcing them to come here, but by providing amenities that would want them to be here. And what it does, it expands capacity at Hopkins. It's basically, if you close Burke Airport, capacity at Hopkins shrinks, and if you develop Burke Airport, capacity at Hopkins expands, as well as for county airport.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Just quick, it's not unusual for the larger airport to subsidize the designated reliever airport in this case Burke Lakefront Airport. So that's not unusual. You find that across the country, that the larger airports are willing to pay a subsidy to keep the GA airport open because there's a benefit to that larger airport.
Thank you for explaining that. Thank you very much for explaining that, Ricky Smith. I apologize if I look like I'm checking my cell phone. I'm just checking the time. I don't have a watch anymore. Councilman Kelly, briefly, come to the, and then we'll get to your question, sir.
Thank you, Dan. Real briefly, I just wanted to comment on the question and the answer that was given, because the question comes up that is there this magical number that Cleveland would have to pay back, and people see that as the impediment. The answer clearly demonstrates that a number is not a decision. The number can be gotten one way or another, but the impact that this decision will have in terms of traffic at Hopkins, in terms of the system, is the real issue. So while the number is simple, the answer that was given was very intelligently given to reflect that that is not the issue. The issue is in the complexity of how this would affect the system in general. Thanks.
And I think that also there's a question out there too, that the number, and then there's also the relative benefit to the entire region about whether Burke remains open or Burke is closed and the lakefront reclaimed for other recreational uses besides recreational aviation. We have a question over here, gentleman in the green shirt.
John Saunders, City of Bedford Council. I think this region has a plus in the fact that their airports are fairly I would say accessible and quick. You can get to them fairly quickly. However, that comes with a disadvantage in the fact that most of these airports, with the exception of maybe Burke, and that may be growing with the warehouse district being developed, is the fact that these airports are in the middle of highly dense residential populations. The county airport in Willoughby Hills has a problem.
The airports were there first.
For the record. Director Smith, where exactly do your sympathies lie?
But in any case, I know there's been advances with Hopkins in some of the areas around there by buying out neighborhoods and turning them into commercial districts and things like that. But there are areas that Hopkins doesn't realize, I don't think, that they affect. One of them being my community in the city of Bedford. You would think, well, we're on the southeast side of the county, why would that be a problem? But my number 2 biggest complaint about noise is jet engines. Number 1, of course, is train noise. Anybody can hear those train whistles, that's it. But number 2 is jet engines. You forget that the city of Bedford sits way up in elevation, and your jets are coming down into the airport. Now, this is only during bad weather days, but when you come down, once you get past Center Road, of course, the elevation drops off significantly, but the eastern half of the city, and even parts of Solon and Bedford Heights are the same way. As those jets are coming down, they're de-accelerating, of course, that makes the jet engines even louder. But they rattle houses. So you've got residential areas that are a problem, that are just not outside surrounding the airport itself. But you've got all these different aspects that need to be looked at too when you're starting to do expansions and whatnot. Now granted, like I said, it's only during the bad weather days that happens in that lake. But you've got to look at more of a picture than just what surrounds you too. So I know the county airport, having worked for county engineers for 25 years, I worked on several of the runway repairs and all that stuff. The biggest complaint we always got there was all the neighborhood that surrounds it. Burke, if you close Burke, you're really going to start getting the complaints. So you're going to have to keep Burke open just for that reason, to keep it downtown. Now, the city of Cleveland would have built the jet port out on the lake many years ago when that was, all this would have been solved.
Then we'd be the Tokyo of the Midwest.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to worry about Pittsburgh.
Councilman, if I may, do you have a question, or is it a statement for the record?
The main question is what is really being done in the way of noise? I hear factors that jet engines are being changed now, the quieter ones, but of course that'll take decades to get all these revamped. Is there anything being done outside of just the general immediate areas of the airport, or has any thought been given to any of these residential neighborhoods that surround it that may be at a higher elevation or something that do get affected by them?
the councilman's question has to do with noise abatement and presumably the public process involved in future master plans and that sort of a thing.